we've got a critical mass on here, I think, so we can go ahead and get started, Jane, whenever you are ready.
All right. When I want to say good afternoon, I'm Jane Harf, the Executive Director of Green Energy Ohio, and I want to welcome all of you to this growing local solar workshop for community leaders. This is the fourth in the series of workshops hosted by Green Energy Ohio and the Ohio Environmental Council. And today we are very pleased to have Solar United Neighbors as a partner on our event. It all started in a coffee shop in Granville in 2018. I was having a conversation with Jeremy King, who is the Director of Sustainability at Denison University. And we were talking about the process that the university went through in an effort to get their solar array permitted and built. And one of the things that he said was, you know, local officials, many of them aren't familiar with these processes. And he thought that it would be beneficial and informative if we could put together some sort of session that would help local officials across the state to better understand the process. Well, this fits perfectly with the GEO mission. And the first thing we did was call OEC, because who else would be better to partner on this kind of outreach effort? The initial workshop was held at Denison in 2018, and we've had two since, one at the University of Dayton and one in Newburgh Heights. And we're very pleased. This is our first all virtual event, but we are very pleased that you chose to spend an extended lunch hour with us today and hopefully again tomorrow. Today we're going to be talking about the whys, WHY. Why does it make sense for local communities to invest in solar? And tomorrow we're going to be talking about the hows, going into greater detail about how to accomplish it with an in-depth look at the Lakewood experience. Our thanks go to all of our expert presenters today and tomorrow, and special thanks go to Tom Bullock and Tristan Rader, both of whom wear many hats, including clean energy activists, and local government officials, without whom we could not have done this. We really sat down, the four of us, and talked about it. And of course, some of you may be active in the group that they are leading, which is the Northeast Ohio Local Government Clean Energy Caucus, a great way to connect with others who care about the same issues you do. So our first session today will be, I'm going to read the title, The Opportunity for Solar Development in Ohio. It's an overview. We got to start with the basics. And to do that, we have Randy Lepla, who is the Vice President for Energy Policy at the OEC.
Great, thank you so much, Jane. And I'm glad everyone could see you while you introduced that. Made it much more interesting. So I'm gonna get my slides rolling here. So give me 1 second to share my screen. All right. Okay, can you guys see that all okay? Okay, I'm good now. All right, great. Well, as Jane said, I'm Randy Lepla. I'm with Ohio Environmental Council. I'm our VP of Energy Policy and Lead Energy Council. And the OEC is a 51-year-old nonprofit advocacy organization, and we seek to secure healthy air, land, and water for all who call Ohio home. And we also work on democracy issues because a healthy democracy is key to having a healthy environment. So I am going to walk us through, as Jane said, just kind of lay of the land and what you can expect from solar in Ohio. So stage setting, essentially. So Ohio's potential for solar energy is, we hear often folks asking, well, it's not very sunny in Ohio, and I know, you know, we're up in the Cleveland area. Does it even work? And the answer is absolutely, it 100% works. And the good news is that solar pricing is tumbling. And there are some market and consumer trends that are really exciting that we're seeing, making this even more doable, right? So like I said, we've got lots of folks asking, is solar even possible in Ohio? And the answer is yes. So this map that I'm showing you now is produced by the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, NREL, and shows what a good place Ohio really is for solar. And the technology has improved drastically. So the industry's capability to collect solar as a resource more efficiently and transition that into power that can be used in homes and businesses is just improving all the time. So while we're not Arizona or New Mexico, technologically speaking, we do have the resources for solar that set us up to do it well here. So this is my next point. You know, solar is already here. This is not something that's coming. This is something that's here. And this map that I'm showing you now has all the yellow dots right there. Those are all solar installations, and this is as of May 6th of this year. So these are all solar installations in the state of Ohio. And what I'll tell you is that in the last couple of years, particularly the solar energy industry has really taken off. So we're going to see a lot more yellow dots added to the point where maybe we won't even, you can barely see Ohio's outline anyway, right? But additionally, utility scale solar is really soaring here in the state. There are over 5,000 megawatts that are either approved pending or in the pre-application process at the Ohio Power Siting Board. And that is a huge amount of solar coming to the state. So how much solar, right? These are the stats, some of the stats that come from Cuya. And I've got the link down at the bottom if you're interested in taking a look at this and some of the stats later. But the total solar investment in the state is, you know, well over $700 million now, and that's up from $608 million just last year. So it's not just that this is an impressive number, it's impressive how quickly this is growing is something that I really have noticed over the years I've been working on this. We have 288 solar megawatts or megawatts installed, excuse me, and that's up from 207 last year. So what I will say though is that our current national ranking, we've got more work to do. We can do much more in the solar industry, and this is why I hope that all of you will get something out of this and understand how you can bring solar back to your communities, because we are only 30th in current national ranking, down actually from last year, but our growth projection is going up. So we have so much more that we could do in the state and so much more clean energy that we could bring as we transition away from dirty energy. So another piece that's really important here, and you'll see down toward the bottom, how many solar companies we have in the state and how many jobs we have. So the renewables and clean energy industry, there's over 114,000 jobs in the state of Ohio, and that includes efficiency as well as renewables. But solar jobs alone is over 7,000. And these are the companies, just to give you an idea of where they're strewn throughout the state. And they're all different types, right? Manufacturers, installers, other types of folks that are involved in the supply chain. So although we have these available resources with solar, we really need to make sure that we have a trained workforce and companies involved in industry. So we need to, you know, look at the project economics and the regulatory framework, but we've got the workforce base here. So it's really exciting, you know, that we've got such potential in the state of Ohio to not just move toward clean energy, but to really build you know, our jobs and resources for families in Ohio as well. So these topics can lead us down a rabbit hole and they can get very, very complex. So we could spend an entire workshop on some of this, but I'm going to briefly touch on project economics, and then I will do a quick overview of the regulatory structure, and just bear with me. And if you do have questions, you can pop those in the chat. So this is just an example of basic project economics. This is Lazard's latest levelized cost energy analysis, and it shows this continued decline in the cost of generating electricity from alternative energy technologies, especially utility scale solar and wind. So in some of these scenarios, alternative energy costs have decreased to the point that they're now below or are at or below, the cost of conventional generation. So making this not just a good choice for clean energy and clean air, but makes financial sense too. So these are the types of things that you need to think about when you're talking about solar project economics, right? Simple payback periods, returns on investments are dictated by the cost of electricity. You've got the projected energy savings for the end user, what they're going to pay for that cost, the market prices of solar renewable energy credits, which you know, we don't have a great resource here in Ohio right now. But we also have labor and material costs, which again are tumbling. And the more we increase the number of solar manufacturers in the state, the lower that will get for Ohioans. So that's something to think about. And then we've got the contractual arrangement between vendors and suppliers and things like that. And then there's, of course, tariffs on the panels and components, which we saw a big problem with during the Trump administration, adding those additional tariffs. We'll see what happens with the next administration, whether they leave those in place or whether they repeal those and things change on the federal front. So this, I will just, like I said, briefly touch on the regulatory framework because I think it's pretty important. There are multiple kinds of utility entities, right? This is a generic term. So we have investor-owned distribution utilities, and those are the ones that most of us think about because 80% of Ohioans are served by these. So this is the AEP, the First Energy, Duke Energy, and DP&L. And we also have municipal utilities. So Cleveland Public Power, who you'll probably hear about from one of our speakers later today, they serve about 70,000 residential and commercial customers in and around the Cleveland area. And then you have electric cooperatives, so individual co-ops, like I'm trying to think of one, Energy Co-op in the Newark area, Buckeye Power, those are electric cooperatives. You've got competitive retail energy suppliers, providers. So those are who you can go out and purchase your energy from. You are able to shop for your energy in the state of Ohio. And then you've got marketers and aggregators and things like that. So how does this all work? And this is a very simplified structure, right? But basically you've got your generation, so where your energy is coming from. And we're focused on solar in this discussion today. So whether it's the coal, the hydro, the nuclear, or the solar, you've got your generation, and that gets transmitted through high voltage transmission lines, wherever you're going, the substation typically, and then you get to your distribution lines and wires, and that's your AEP Ohio. That's what your municipal utilities are doing. Those are your distribution wires. They're doing that. And then that is what takes it to your end use. So your industrial customers, your residential customers, and your small and medium-sized businesses. So it's just important to understand because when we talk about the different frameworks or different pieces today, you'll hear us referencing some of this. And this is different. So we're deregulated. Let me go back to that prior slide. So we are deregulated in this state. That means that the AEP Ohio's of the world aren't supposed to own generation. There are some small exceptions to that, but they typically don't own that. That's why you can choose to do solar. And you can choose where your generation comes from, like I said, with those press providers. The structure of municipal and cooperative utilities is slightly different. They don't have to be deregulated quite like we are, so their structure is slightly different. So I just give this to you as another example. So how do all of these present an opportunity for harnessing consumer and market trends? So we want to take a look at those trends, right? What's really important right now is that we've got market demand for renewables, both from individuals that are looking at this from the cost perspective because they realize this is a good cost investment, but also from the public because people are demanding clean energy as they recognize the harms of climate change and the impacts to our health. So we're seeing significant demand for this. And by 2030, our distributed generation, so this is your rooftop solar, your smaller scale solar facilities, could grow up to 950 megawatts. And I think that this is slightly outdated, maybe last year's numbers. So I would guess that that's even higher now. So the other piece, like I said, you've got evolving opinions. It's not just hippie tree huggers, obviously, that want this. This is a recent poll found that conservative voters were strongly supportive at 59% of the ability to self-generate and sell your excess power. So that would be your net metering opportunities that we'll get to a little bit later too. There's also a lot of motivating factor behind the federal investment tax credit for people to take advantage of this now because there are some federal tax credits that you can secure. Again, with a new administration coming in that seems more receptive to renewables, we may see this change in the coming year. And then there's technological advances, like I said, that are really making this make a lot of sense because you can actually store some of this clean energy and not have to rely on other items. So just to give you a quick idea of what Ohio laws there are that help and hinder solar projects. So the types of things that help, right? We are competitive electric supply for most Ohioans. Like I said, you can go shop for your energy. So that's helpful because you can choose solar. You can make that choice as an Ohio consumer. The smaller projects like rooftop solar are not subject, and larger than that too, they are not subject to statewide permitting. Only the larger projects are subject to that. So there's a lot more opportunity to do small scale projects that can really make an impact in communities and neighborhoods. Net metering is enabled in most areas. This is the ability for you to get paid back for excess power you generate and send to the grid. And like I said, the federal tax credits, which are tapering down, but could change given a new administration coming in. And then flexible siting requirements for net metering systems. So some of that is still being sorted out in effect, but we do have other Ohio policies that are not so favorable and helpful for solar. This is currently, we have a lack of an RPS, a renewable portfolio standard, and that's the percentage where, we used to have a renewable portfolio standard of 12.5% by 2026. House Bill 6 that was passed last year and has been quite the talk of the town, given the scandal related to the former Speaker of the House and the bribery scandal that is in the headlines a lot, I guess I'll say. It has reduced that to 8.5% and sunsets the policy completely in 2026. So that is unfortunate, but that's part of the reality that we have now here in Ohio when we're trying to drive renewables. There are some limitations on contracting for power supply, but not enough that would impact some of the things that we'll be talking about today. Additionally, like I said, we do have net metering, and that's wonderful, but we did have a situation last year and a half, that reduces some of that compensation that you're able to receive. So that's something that we would like to see remedied and improved, and make sure that everybody gets full compensation for what their power that they send back to the grid. And then finally, the continued policy uncertainty at the state level makes some of this a little bit difficult. I'm going back to House Bill 6 again. There are 3 bills pending for a full repeal. There is 1 bill that's a partial repeal, and then there's now a bill that's having hearings later today that would simply delay it. So that uncertainty at the state level makes it difficult for folks that want to invest in the state on the larger scale level, but shouldn't have an impact in communities directly, or hopefully wouldn't. So that was a lot, I know. And like I said, I think I see, if anybody does have questions, I think I see a couple popping up in the chat right now, but we'll try to get those answered. But here's my contact information if you do have additional questions. And as Jane mentioned, our fantastic panelists and presenters today and tomorrow, and I hope you'll be able to join us tomorrow too, we'll really be digging into a lot of what I just quickly covered on a much deeper level. And really digging into the tools that are at your disposal to pursue solar in your community, because the opportunities are great here in Ohio. And it's a really exciting time to be in this field and to see all of the excitement and all of the development that's going on to move us toward a clean energy future. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Joe Florida. He is the Executive Director for Power a Clean Future Ohio, and he is going to talk to us about how you can get engaged in your community with PCFO and support transitioning your community to solar. So take it away, Joe.
Great, thank you, Randy. And just give me 1 second here. I'm gonna put up some slides as well. Hopefully I won't stick to them too much, but I want to just make sure I have something to go off of here. 1 second. All right, can one of my fellow panelists let me know, is everyone seeing that okay?
Yep, looks good.
We're good to go, Joe.
Great, thank you. So Power Clean Future Ohio is a campaign that launched here in the state in February of this year. And over the past 10 months, what we are focusing on, what we'll be focusing on in over the next several years, is working with local communities to reduce emissions. So we want local governments to have all the resources at their disposal to be able to embrace clean energy and ensure that their residents have access to renewable energy, electric vehicles, efficient homes and workplaces, and that they have clean air to breathe and clean water to drink. And so that is really the central focus of this work, is to work with mayors, city council members, city managers, city staff that want to pursue these goals. So what that looks like for us is the key focus around identifying what policy actions local governments can take, and we'll get into how this impacts specifically on solar. But the idea here is, what are different policy solutions that are within the purview of local governments that they can implement? What are ways that they can grow their clean energy economy, partner with their local businesses, their schools, to make sure that they're open for business when it comes to renewable energy, when it comes to solar development. The other aspect of this is making sure we're thinking about how this impacts all of the community's residents. So what are the equitable ways we can approach this work? How have marginalized communities been excluded from conversations in the past, and how do we fix that? How do we make sure they have a voice at the table as we develop local policy? And also we know that local governments are facing revenue shortfalls, and that there's real challenges for local governments in doing some of this work. So how can we think about solutions in this space that can help save money, reduce costs, but also finding funding sources and finding opportunities, grant programs that are out there for these local governments to pursue. The key here is we want to make sure these goals that we're setting, what we're asking communities to consider, that they're achievable, measurable, equitable, and economical. We want to make sure that it checks all those boxes, because if we're not putting the solutions that fit best for the community first, then they're certainly not going to be sustainable by any definition. So this is what our set of current communities that we've recruited to join Power Clean Future Ohio. So right now, you can see we've had a spread across the state here. We're going to be talking with more and more communities about this work. And I think in the year ahead, we're really excited to add many other communities in Northeast Ohio. I think that will certainly be a place where there's already been a lot of interest. We've had a lot of ongoing conversations, and certainly if your community is interested, please let me know. Feel free to message me in the chat or reach out afterwards. I'll put my contact information at the end here. So what does it look like for a community to embrace solar, to embrace clean energy? How can they approach this work? The key for us, and this is a very loose guideline that we would provide for communities to consider, is, first it's understanding where are your emissions. If you want to embrace clean energy, what are ways in which you can do it that are most effective? And so first is an understanding of where your current set of emissions. So we're helping communities identify ways in which they can do a greenhouse gas inventory. For Cuyahoga County, the planning commission in Cuyahoga County has already done this. So the county has done greenhouse gas inventories for every city within the county. And so you can actually get online and look up, if you're within the county, where's my emission profile in 2010, and all the way up. The most recent year that they've assessed is 2017. And so you can see, have emissions fallen, have they gone up, and what are the opportunities to get in and do this work, and where should your community really be focused? I would expect that renewable energy is the real opportunity here. I mean, there's a number of different spaces we work in, but making sure your community is solar ready, and that there's ways in which your government is embracing solar, that's really critical to the future of your community's emissions and the future of the air you breathe. And so I think thinking about that first, checking where is your community on emissions? Have they done a baseline? Is that something that we could help with potentially? The next step is identify the opportunities. Figure out what are the areas where your community has a gap. Randy mentioned net metering. What are some of the local policies where your city or your community could be more competitive? And so identifying those and then pursuing them, making a commitment, we think is really critical as this next phase. Saying you're gonna reduce emissions, or saying you're gonna grow clean energy by X amount. I think we've seen a number of communities in Northeast Ohio go about this. South Euclid, Lakewood is obviously a leader on this front as well. Cleveland is also committed to committing to 100% renewable energy. So it's really exciting to see communities doing that. And I apologize for the dog barking in the background. But it's really exciting to see communities doing that and really making a commitment to their own clean energy future. The next two steps we think are critical in working with the community, making sure that residents are engaged in this process. And this is where, if you're a resident or if you're a community leader, either way, you should be a central piece to this, and making sure you're involved. It's reaching out. It's making sure that you're getting feedback from, as I mentioned before, communities that haven't been traditionally at the table. And then finally, developing that plan for implementation, which I'm going to touch on briefly here. There's a lot of different ways communities can go about this work. One critical area for this is sustainability planning, which is a large, kind of comprehensive approach to this. And if your city has not done this, has not done sustainability planning, this is really a great area where they can dig in and say, how can we increase solar in our community? What are the ways in which we can do that? Sustainability planning, you can have a particular focus on that. A subset of that is a climate action plan, which really focuses solely on greenhouse gas emissions. How are we impacting climate change? This can also be an area where there's a specific goal set out for expanding solar use in your community on residential rooftops or within the government's use of solar as well. So that there's kind of two approaches to that. And we also want to make sure we're helpful. And I would ask you all to take a look, and we can post in the chat here for everyone to see that we've developed this toolkit for municipalities. It's the Ohio Clean Energy and Sustainable Communities Toolkit. It launched in October, and the work here is really focused on how do we get communities the ideas that they need, the technical assistance, the resources to actually do this work. There's a whole section devoted to how to expand solar in your community and how to expand renewable energy in your community. And so really digging into this and having the opportunity to look where your community is, what are some opportunities or ideas that are out there. There's a number of case studies involved in this. So you can take a look and see, okay, here's an opportunity for my community to expand solar energy by putting rooftop solar on my municipal buildings, or partnering with my school to make sure that all the schools have solar on their rooftops. Or there's lots of different opportunities here, and they're outlined in the toolkit. There's kind of two ways we think about this when it comes to clean energy action, and specifically in solar development as well for local governments. There's items that are city controlled. So there's things that are within the city's purview. That's the operations of the fleet, the buildings, if they manage their own municipal electric. It's those types of things that are really city controlled. And then there's also city influence. So cities are great conveners. They can bring together residents, they can bring together businesses to make sure that everyone's on the same page, but also thinking about what's an opportunity they could pursue together. So you're seeing here a few different things. One area that's noted on there in particular is solar is around power purchase agreements. That's one way that a community can have a direct impact to their own control of their contracts. So where do they get their energy? And so PPA would be a great way in which a community can pursue that within their own work. So here's just a sample from the toolkit and ways in which you can dig in on your community's use of renewable energy and your community's opportunities to use more solar. And so I think here's a few case studies you can see down through there with some Ohio examples in particular, Cincinnati, Newark, and Columbus. These are all areas in which you can these are all city controlled examples in which this is under the purview of a community where they can potentially pursue community choice aggregation, where we're seeing that more and more in Northeast Ohio. Obviously there's lots of communities that are already aggregated. So what are the ways in which your community can take a hard look at that aggregation contract if it already does have one? How much renewable energy is coming from that aggregation contract? The price competition in the market right now makes renewable energy and solar in particular really price competitive. And so more and more communities are finding that they can get 100% renewable energy contracts for their community choice aggregation. And it's competitive with what their previous contract was. So really taking a close look at these actionable steps that you're seeing in this chart. What are ways in which your community can pursue some of this work? Finally, I would just challenge everyone to think about, there's a lot of ways you can get involved, in particular with your local government. Think for just a moment. I know this year was a really intense political year, but obviously a lot of that was at the national level. But many folks don't think about who's on the ballot in the next year for their local government. Who is your mayor? What have they done in this space? Who is your city council member? What are they doing on these issues? Have you talked with your county commissioners? Do you know who those individuals are? When do they meet? I think it's a common question that many of us don't know, and we haven't ever attended a city council meeting. And so I challenge all of you to think about that. City council members I've talked to many of them, they will say they hear from the same folks over and over again. Show up to your city council meeting and challenge them on these issues. Challenge them on the future of clean energy in your community, and what your city is doing to address the climate challenge that we all face. So these are just some questions that I would ask everyone to think about, and ways in which you can engage with your local government on these issues. Final slide here is just my contact information. I encourage everyone to check out our website, poweracleanfuture.org, and feel free to reach out to me at any point in time if you want to talk more about ways in which your community can get involved in PCFO, or you as an individual, if you would like to get involved in any way. feel free to, like I said, check out our website, sign up for our newsletter, or reach out to me individually if there's anything else I can do to help. Great, I will turn it back over to you all.
Great. Well, just a reminder, if you do have questions, feel free to pop those in the chat. And I've also included Joe's website for Power Clean Future Ohio in the chat box. So if you're interested in checking that out, you can click that link. And I will turn it back to you, Jane.
Did anyone have a specific question for Joe before we move on to the next speaker? I admit I have not been watching the chat questions as they came up. Joe, do you see anything there?
I do not. I think I will
Okay.
keep an eye out on it though, and if anyone has any questions, I will be sure to.
Well, and we will make available the slides that people are showing, so that you will have not only the information but also contact information, the substantive information and contact information for all of our speakers. Thank you, Joe. It's great to have this new organization in Ohio. It's a great resource for local communities. I know you want to grow it next year. I think you have a goal of like 30 communities. So anybody on here who found that to be beneficial, and I'm sure you did, give him a call and see what you can do together. It's great.
Thank you, Jane. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. We will now hear from Sarah Conley-Ballou. She is the Sustainable Energy Solutions Director at Rural Action, and I am very pleased to say that she is also a member of the Green Energy Ohio Board of Directors. She's going to be discussing SoulSmart, which is a DOE-funded program that recognizes cities, counties, regional organizations for making it possible to go solar. They provide no-cost technical assistance, and they really want to see the expansion of solar programs, and they want to help in whatever way possible. And Sarah's going to tell us more about that.
Thanks, Jane. Hey, everyone. It's nice to be here today, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak about another tool in the toolkit for local governments and municipalities who really are interested in making forward progress on renewable energy development. As Jane said, I work for Rural Action. I'm the Sustainable Energy Solutions Director, and we're based in Southeast Ohio, Appalachian, Ohio. And much of our work is centered around really catalyzing the demand for solar in a region that has had different barriers to development than urban places across Ohio. And yet there's been some incredible progress made in small villages and county seats here in the region that can really be extended to and scaled and replicated in other parts of the state. So I will get my screen shared here, and we can kind of walk through some of the finer points of SoulSmart. So one moment. Okay, hopefully you can see that. I would be remiss if I didn't say that Rural Action is a membership-based organization, and we work on a spate of projects from zero waste to sustainable forestry, sustainable agriculture, community development, entrepreneurship, and our work on sustainable energy is just one of many tools in a toolkit for revitalizing the Appalachian region. So you can learn more about our organization at ruralaction.org. So SoulSmart, I guess I was invited today because here in the state of Ohio, we have only 4 SoulSmart designated communities to date. And yet SoulSmart is a nationwide program that now has up to 350 communities. And the map you see here might be a bit out of date, but there are now 350 communities across the country, large and small, that have committed to a process to identify the barriers to solar development. These barriers include regulatory hurdles, zoning issues, and some of the barriers that tend to contribute to the high cost of solar. We're not talking the cost of equipment, panels, and inverters so much as the cost of doing business in the solar marketplace. So I endeavored to help as a SolSmart advisor for communities in Southeast Ohio back in 2017. So this was the unincorporated Athens County region, as well as the city of Athens, which I think I'll focus most on the work that was done there, because that was really, I think, the most engaged community we had. But we also supported the village of Amesville and the village of Somerset, just north of Athens, to really, work through the process of becoming bronze designated through the SolSmart program. Let's see, does my next slide? Yes, so my next slide kind of gives you an idea of what is the SolSmart designation process. So it begins with a self-assessment. A community says, okay, we know solar is an important priority. Where are we at today? Are we able to allow by ordinance solar development on residential properties, on businesses, on commercial buildings, or aren't we? Are there barriers standing in the way? Is there an onerously high permit fee? Is there setback requirements that are too prohibitive? Or are historic buildings totally prohibited from solar development? I mean, those are all factors at play. Do we have a homeowners association that refuses to allow solar to be installed on rooftops or ground mount systems in a homeowner association community? So the first step is a community that says, okay, where are we at today? And then from that place, they identify sort of a roadmap, a step-by-step plan, using SolSmart criteria and designation processes to look at the zoning and permitting and look at all of those factors, and set a target. So there's 3 levels: bronze, silver, and gold. Each of those levels are based on the steps taken and the initiative and ambition of a community. The 4 communities I worked with achieved bronze level status, which means that they completed all the criteria that they set forth to complete within a 6-month period. That time period can shift. It's highly relative based on the community. And just in the last 3 months, the city of Athens passed legislation which makes solar a by right on our ordinance. And I'll speak more in depth about that in a moment. But essentially taking that action allows us now to become a silver designated community. So it's exciting. And that's really how SolSmart's designed. It's a step-by-step process to reach a point where you are open for solar business and really reducing any barriers that might stand in the way of this type of development. Again, the goals of this program are really broad. It's to make solar more accessible, affordable, really, by design, benefiting any community that wants to attract solar industry to the region. They see it as an economic development tool. As Joe was talking about, this is for a lot of governments part of their sustainability plan, or if they're lacking in sustainability planning, perhaps just part of their comprehensive plan. So if that's an initiative that is important to you, but you don't really know how to do it, the SolSmart program is a great tool to walk through those steps. And again, too, this is no cost. Well, let's say it's a cost to the Department of Energy. It's a federally funded program. So depending on a community's ability to walk through the SolSmart process themselves, they can do it independent of a SolSmart advisor or SolSmart technical support team. But if they need that help, SolSmart does provide that help. So again, like I was saying, that what piece of solar cost is this really impacting? Well, again, it's not, this program doesn't make the panels cheaper or the equipment cheaper or the labor cheaper. As we know, that market is pretty fixed, but it does really impact any sort of soft costs that are related to the solar development process, or the total price of solar. That includes, again, anything like permitting, which oftentimes, and especially in larger cities, can range anywhere from $50 for a permit to install solar on your home to $3,000 to install a commercial system. So if those costs stand in the way, or are the pinch point between, yes, we're going to go solar, or no, we're not, a municipality or a local government really should step in and say, listen, like, let's reevaluate this. Is this cost necessary? Or are we trying to encourage solar? Are we trying to really turn that green light on and say, we're not going to stand in your way. We're going to make this process as affordable as possible, because this is a priority for our community. Again, I guess this kind of reinforces what I'm saying. And I guess I'll point to not just the cost, but the streamlining of the process. Time is money, right? So if it does take a solar developer 6 months to a year to get approval for a project, that's not going to fly. We see this time and again. And in a state like Ohio, where we do have these mixed market signals, as Randy pointed to, and there is a level of uncertainty to the life of the investment. How can we really push that and streamline that process so that when a developer comes to a community and says, I'm interested in really helping you meet your solar goals, there aren't those onerous barriers in terms of time. Just to kind of dive deeper into the zoning code side of this. So most communities have both a zoning code as well as a building code and a building department. In my experience, I work here in a rural part of Ohio where we do not have building codes. We do, in fact, though, have zoning codes, which has made it possible for communities like the city of Athens to regulate lot sizes and parcels and things like that, but really does not have any influence over how one builds, where one builds, what one builds. So those are things that we really couldn't look at when it came to this SoulSmart process. As the SoulSmart advisor, I said, okay, what are our barriers? And the building code side of things was not a barrier, because it's the Wild West and people can build what they want to build, more or less where they want to build it. Yet we do have zoning codes, and those zoning codes do have impacts on solar. So for me, the experience of looking through the City of Athens, Village of Somerset, Village of Amesville's zoning code was really revealing. So again, these ordinances regulate how property can be used, whether the development planning, or whether the proposed development does indeed match that zoning code. Will this solar array be above a certain lot height or building height? That's something that sometimes comes into play. Or will the setback rules on either side of a lot be impacted by a ground mount array? Those are the kinds of things that get reviewed during a zoning review around solar. So just makes sense to step back and look at what those zoning barriers could be. And if in fact a community does have a permitting process, so that when you want to build something new on your property, you have to file for and be granted a permit, whether what types of costs and impacts might that have on solar development. We do know that the best way for a community to really incentivize solar, as Joe was talking about, putting it into your plans, whether you have a comprehensive plan, which almost every community that's incorporated does, or whether it's just, a little bit smaller, a neighborhood plan. Is there a neighborhood association that really wants to drive solar development? How can they add specific language that says a solar energy system is encouraged in this, and this circumstance, right? Spell it out. When it's spelled out, when it's codified, it gives legitimacy to solar. And you'd be surprised at how few codes of ordinances across the country, even in large urban centers, don't have language around what is a solar energy system, where can it be applied, where can't it be applied. But that's really an important step. Takes out the vagaries. It removes issues like, the Board of Zoning Appeals having to come in and say, hey, you built solar where you shouldn't build solar. If it's spelled out in the code, and if it's applied in such a way that solar has a right to be there, solar systems are rightfully allowed in X, Y, and Z context, that is really important for solar development and solar planning. So I just, thought I'd let everybody know, if this is a tool that a small community, large community, anyone in between is interested in doing, this SolSmart application process is relatively simple. It again is sort of a litmus test for where we are today in a given community, and then a plan is built from that. So I think it's just easy to access. Go to solsmart.org and they can get you started. There's a standard pathway, a modified pathway, which sort of deviates from the basic approach, but the modified pathway is good for a community such as the village of Amesville or Somerset, where they don't have any control over their permitting, planning, and zoning process. So they work with you where you are, and I think that's been a really valuable tool. And I think that's it. Happy to answer any questions. This is something that I'm not currently working on, but I'm always willing to be a resource for any community that does want to connect up with SolSmart or have any further questions. So you're welcome to reach out. There's my contact information, and I haven't looked at the chat, so maybe there's some questions in there. Okay, back to you, Jane.
Well, actually, there was a comment from Craig Foster that the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission is working on an application for Bronze SolSmart. And I am sure they're willing to share, as it is helpful. So yeah, I think there may be communities throughout the state that are thinking about this, or maybe already in the process, but it definitely has huge potential to be helpful, especially, as you say, for some of the smaller communities that really don't have their own, sustainability infrastructure already in place, but they would like to move in this direction. So thank you very much for joining us.
No problem. Happy to be here.
So the first thing that comes to mind for most of us when we think about solar energy is environmental benefits, which are, of course, very important. But as community officials, as elected officials, you have to think about the business side of solar energy as well. You have to be able, in fact, I have heard from the mayor of Grove City, Grove City recently passed an aggregation ballot issue, and in a very conservative community. And the dollars and cents piece was what he thinks really put it over the top. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, the business case for solar. And to do that, we have Mike Wise joining us today from McDonald Hopkins, and I will turn it over to Mike.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to see if I can pull up some slides here.
Share your screen at the bottom, maybe.
Randy, you might have to help me.
No problem. I will get them up right now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So the next slide, I just wanted to give folks a little bit of a background on what we've been doing up in Cuyahoga County. This next slide here is a wonderful. Yep, you had it there, Randy.
Sorry about that.
There you go. This is a project that actually got Project of the Year by Solar Builders magazine. It's a 4 megawatt project in Brooklyn, Ohio. You can see Lake Erie to the north and downtown Cleveland as well. And if this was done in a public utility jurisdiction, it would be considered a community solar project because the off-takers of that power are not adjacent or on the same parcel as the solar array. The off-takers are in those large buildings 7 miles to the north. But it wasn't in a public utility. It was in a municipal utility, Cleveland Public Power, and municipal utilities in the state of Ohio, while they don't always exercise the ability, they can do community solar on their own. So this was a wonderful win for Cleveland Public Power to host the project for the city of Brooklyn. They got a sizable rent payment for the use of their landfill, and you can see to the north of those arrays, there's actually enough room to do another 4 megawatts, and that's something that we're going to work on for 2021 and 2022 to do that next phase. And then it was a win for Cuyahoga County as well, because they entered into a 20-year power purchase agreement, and they'll actually save $500,000 over the term of that power purchase agreement on the price of their electricity. And you know, Laura, you mentioned businesses and the economics. I mean, governments are really concerned about economics too. And we just saw such a major shift over the last 3 or 4 years when solar initially was more expensive than the grid, and then it reached grid parity. And then in many cases, it's actually less expensive than your grid power. And, you know, the private sector hasn't necessarily caught up with the economics, and the public sector hasn't necessarily caught up with the economics either. And they may still be remembering that you had to pay a premium if you wanted solar power. That's certainly, for the most part, not true. And even somebody like a major hospital or Google or Facebook, they can do large utility scale solar and not pay more for their power. It's the change over the last few years has been that pronounced. So Randy, if you could go on to the next slide, please. So this project was all those players on the right, a lot of local talent, including First Solar up in Toledo that provided the panels, and RBI Solar from Youngstown that provided the racking, and IGS Solar, which ultimately ended up being the owner. We helped develop the project and then flipped it to another Ohio company, IGS Solar, and they're running it right now. And then next slide, Randy. So we parlayed that to the county was very happy with that result, but then they wanted to do something that was more visual for them. So we worked with them on an RFP that allowed the county and then any municipality in the county to piggyback off of that RFP and put solar on their buildings or on their property for a fixed price, which we had determined would be a cost saving price for the county. And it's also turned out to be a cost-saving price for the municipalities that have availed themselves of it. So we did, if you go a couple slides more in, Randy, we'll just jump ahead. I think I have them. Yeah, actually the last slide. Before that one, there you go. For the county, we did, next one, Randy. We did the animal shelter. It's the second to last one, Randy, I apologize. There you go. We
Sorry,
did
Mike.
the animals. Yeah, we did the animal shelter. We did the morgue. And we're working on the Jane Edna Municipal building or county building, which I think is going to be done any day now. And then we're doing a maintenance garage for the county as well. So 4 of their buildings. And then Lakewood, I think one of the Lakewood councilmen is on this call, Tom Bullock. They just went, they had a commercial operation date, I think this week for a number of their buildings as well. So that's, and they would be great, maybe they want to chime in, but I mean, they really took a hard look at the economics for the municipality. And I don't think that they would have done as much as they embrace sustainability. I don't think they were interested in paying more for their electricity, and they are going to end up saving some money. If you look at the breadth of their project, they will save money on their electric bills. So that's kind of the view of, from the government side. And, clearly this is interesting for the private side as well. And I think there's been a lot of important events over the last 4 or 5 years, but in the recent past, I would say that the Davos event in Europe in the spring was a real eye opener because of the focus on ESG and how, starting with really, I think the Blackstone Group, which is I think the largest private equity firm in the world. They made a corporate decision that they were going to take into account ESG as they made investments in companies. So companies that wanted access to that capital had to show that those were important considerations for them. So we've seen at McDonald Hopkins, we've seen a number of clients, mid-market and certainly large cap companies as well, realize that they've got to look at sustainability, they've got to look at their energy footprint, they've got to get a sense of their carbon footprint. And even though many of our clients don't operate in a jurisdiction that has carbon trading, they're still now embracing efficiency programs and renewable energy programs to show their commitment to ESG. And the good thing is, from the standpoint of solar, they've got this ready-made opportunity that can actually save them money and show their ESG commitment as well. So I just wanted to talk about one example. We're working with an equipment distributor, and for the reasons I just mentioned, they felt compelled to look at solar. And the equipment that they distribute, the OEM is very committed to ESG and renewable energy. So they just they started from scratch, and they pulled out a year's worth of electric bills, and they gave them to us, and we contacted 4 installers, and we have our own solar model here at the firm so that we can crunch numbers, but we got quotes from the installers, and then we aggregated all of the economic incentives that are available. Most notably is still the federal tax credit, which is at 26% this year, drops down to 22% next year. We're all hopeful that with the new administration that we might see that go back up to 30% for some period of time. But you've got that wonderful federal tax credit, and then you've also still have renewable energy credits, which although Ohio has dramatically cut back on the renewable portfolio standard, we still create RECs, and there's still a market for those, and you can still factor those in. And then we also have a tax program that the state of Ohio runs that allows you to pay a fixed fee instead of the normal property taxes. So when you put it all together, we could show, one, if our client did not want to own the system, that they could save money on their electricity if they had a third party own it and they took their power through a power purchase agreement, they could save money. And then if they did want to own the system and take the tax credits themselves because they were in a position to use those tax credits, we could show anywhere from a 3 to 6 or 7 year return on their investment, depending upon the size of the system and who we ended up using as an installer. So definitely the third party ownership was interesting. And then particularly when you start talking about a 3-year return, a company will jump on that all day, and that is available if they have the what's called passive income liability, tax liability, and can use that credit. It really is an incredible investment opportunity for the company. So that's kind of the long and the short of it is, I guess my summary would be the economics, the business case is important to everybody. It's important to government. It's important to nonprofits. It's important to the private sector. And now more than ever, there's a business case that can be made. And that business case is hard dollars, but the business case is also the fact that if they want to access a good portion of the capital markets, the private capital markets, they need to show their commitment to these types of projects and programs. So with that, happy to take any questions.
Well, there is one here for you. Do you help folks use the Ohio Air Quality Development Authority incentives?
Yeah, I haven't accessed them recently. I mean, we've used OAQDA in the past. I'd love to hear somebody's experience working with them on a project, say up to 1 megawatt. I mean, I could see where they might be helpful on a large utility scale project. So I'd love to hear more about that.
And that, yeah, I think we would, that is something that maybe we should add to our agenda here at some point, because
would be a good one.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions? Tristan would like to add a few words.
Give us a Lakewood update.
That's right.
Yeah.
So thank you, Mike. Mike was absolutely instrumental, and I'm a councilman in Lakewood as well, along with Tom Bullock, who's in the call. And we're taking advantage of this. And I just want to pitch tomorrow's session. You're going to be joining me tomorrow at 1, and we're going to go up to actually live stream from the roof of Lakewood City Hall to look at the installation itself and talk a little bit about the components. We'll have other members on the team that Mike served on to get solar on our buildings and on county buildings on the call tomorrow to answer more of your questions and do a bit more of a deep dive. So I want to pitch that. Make sure you join us tomorrow around 1 for more on this, because we really do believe this is a great way cities can offset their energy costs, be more sustainable, and again do that without necessarily adding anything to your budgets, which is great. So it's working for Lakewood, and we'll go more in depth. And thank you, Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Tristan.
Craig Foster, one of our participants, said that his company, Energility, has been using the OAQDA for energy efficiency and 100 plus kilowatt solar projects, smaller systems. So it is apparently an option, which we will definitely explore in greater depth.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions right now? We're doing fine on time. You never quite know how that's going to go. But we're, I think, ready. Oh, Michael, someone wanted Michael's contact information. I believe Mike's information was on the last slide, and he can put that in the chat, or we can.
I'll put it in the chat.
Randy just did.
Oh, thank you, Randy.
And we, as I said, we will also make sure that everyone has a copy of the slide decks from today. There's Jake. I see that. Transparency in decision making is really important, as all of you who work in community government know. In terms of building support, building trust, building acceptance, we've all heard about good projects that failed for lack of sufficient public engagement. So Jake Tribbiano from Solar is Freedom, welcome. He is going to talk to us about some best practices for addressing public concerns in siting solar.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much for having me. I have like a little slideshow, if you guys don't mind me sharing my screen here. Let's see if I can do that. Can everybody see my screen here?
Yep, you are good to go, Jake.
Awesome. Thanks, Randy. So just a little bio so you know who I am and what our company does. So Solar is Freedom. My name is Jake Tribbiano. I'm the director of sales for Solar is Freedom. We do mainly residential. We also do some commercial installations as well. We're a local Ohio company. Our headquarters is in Amelia, Ohio. We have over 90 employees, well over 1,000 residential installs. So we have a ton of experience with the public when it comes to different jurisdictions and concerns that communities might have. As of last year, we're the largest residential solar installer in the state of Ohio. And more importantly to our company, we're the top rated by our customers. But kind of what I wanted to kind of cover today, and what I was asked to cover today was common solar siting issues and just commonly face hurdles that we see as a residential solar installer and that our homeowners also experience as well. So the three main kind of like, I guess, layers of potential issues are: number one, homeowners associations, number two, historic districts, and number three, aesthetic review boards. And the biggest issue, the most common theme between the issues that we run in between the three of those is that there's not a ton of history for residential solar installs in the state of Ohio. So not a lot of jurisdictions and not a lot of homeowners association bylaws or HOA board members or jurisdiction review board members have a ton of experience with solar. And because of that, there's a lot of times the guidelines can be arbitrary because they're, maybe they're based on technology that they saw in a picture from 20 years ago that I'll kind of show you guys in a second. And they can be very subjective as well, especially when it comes to like homeowners associations and things like that, where a lot of times the final decision whether someone can go solar or not is just in the hands of one decision maker who could be very biased either for or against solar. A lot of times the latter. But what this presents to homeowners and the solar installers as hurdles comes into additional cost for the solar project. So whether that's the homeowner paying more money or the solar installer kind of eating the cost, a lot of times there can be, for specific review boards, maybe they require specific engineering reports that can be, upwards of $1,000. It also certainly adds a ton of time to the project. There's been an example that I'll jump into in a second with jurisdiction review boards where maybe they meet once a month, and if they don't approve your project the first time, then you have to come back a second time. And there's been experiences where we've had to go to multiple, I guess occasions over multiple months. So certainly adding time and money to projects isn't the best for the customer, the homeowner, and isn't good for the solar installer either, and not good for the review boards either, because now they're just adding more to their plate. But obviously at the end of the day, the worst case scenario for the homeowner is whether it's the HOA, the historic district, or the review board, aesthetic review board, that they end up getting denied the access to go solar. So they don't have the right to install solar panels on their home and create renewable energy, save a lot of money in the process as well. So these are I just wanted to kind of like identify the most common theme problems before I got into like the best practices. And again, we've had a ton of experiences, or a ton of experience with those, on truly on a daily basis. We are dealing with denials coming from permitting or from review boards, I should say, or HOAs. And the biggest thing that the solar community, I think, does a great job of embracing is working with, not against, people who may not be pro solar. Working with them, and what I mean by that is if you have an aesthetic review board and they don't understand the value or the why somebody is going solar, they're going to be less apt to allow that homeowner to go solar if they don't know why that homeowner wants to do it, if they don't know all the benefits that come with going solar. And we always call it a triple win. So the homeowner wins because the homeowner is going to be immediately saving money on their electric bill. They're also going to be increasing their home value. There's a ton of studies on that. The community wins, obviously, with the home value increase, but also because solar, one of the really cool things about solar is that you have to have somebody come out to your house to install the panels. So you have to support local jobs in the process of going solar. So the community wins because the economy is boosted by more jobs. And then obviously the earth wins because there's a major reduction in your carbon footprint when somebody makes the decision to switch over to solar energy. So that's kind of like number one, like first and foremost, let's make sure that everybody who's involved, the community, the board members, whoever it may be, let's make sure that they know why people want to go solar and what the benefits are. Excuse me. But let's also make sure that they know what is this going to, at the end of the day, what is the final product going to look like? And there's actually just an article that came across my feed yesterday that was about false perceptions on what renewable energy is, and specifically what residential solar is. And a lot of times people think of residential solar and they think of something kind of out of like a sci-fi movie, like this picture here, where you can see there's kind of like solar panels all over the place. They're tilted up on the roof. This certainly is not aesthetically pleasing, appeasing to most people's eye. So people think they're ugly. They think they're clunky. You can see there's like gray frames that pop out here, not flush with the roof. And in this case, very disproportionate. So it's nobody's fault that somebody's perception of solar might be this picture right here, because in the Ohio education system, at least when I went through school here, I was never taught about solar energy or what it looked like. So it's nobody's fault that they don't know the benefits or they don't know what solar looks like. So it's part of our job being in the industry to educate people on what that is. So what solar panels look like in reality, or at least what solar installers have the ability to do, is make sure that the designs are more flush to the roof. They're more proportional. We're using black on black frames like you can see in this picture here. And I kind of just wanted to show you guys like 2 case studies of examples that we've had just this year. This was a project in Grandview Heights in Columbus, Ohio. And for anyone familiar with Columbus, this was on First Avenue, which is a very popular street in Columbus. And this project, it was, as you can see, it's street facing. And it was the first street facing application for solar energy that Grandview Heights had, partaken in, or were presented to them. And so we had, like I mentioned before, we had met with the Grandview Aesthetic Review Board, who did a great job working together with the community, with the homeowners that want to go solar with the solar installers to get more insight to make their decision easier. But we had to go through multiple iterations of this design that you can see here. And there's some designs on the backside of the house as well. But we had to go through multiple iterations in order to get it passed and approved. We also just recently went through one with the city of Bexley, where very similar, we went through multiple meetings that occurred over multiple months, and we had to do certain redesigns and change the layout of the system in order to I guess get the green check mark from everybody. So that's kind of one example that I wanted to show you of something that we're working with the review board to help get them not just one layout, not just one and only one layout, but a variety. I think we ended up having like 10 different layouts for this one home. And at the end of the day, they said, hey, this is the one that we think makes the most aesthetic sense to keep things consistent and I guess appease the community. So this was like an example with a jurisdiction. Again, that was Grandview Heights. This was another install that we did this year that was in Cincinnati with the homeowners association. And really what happened was the homeowners association, and we, again, it's all about working together and making sure everybody's on the same page. And we've worked with HOAs in the past that have absolutely no guidelines on solar, or HOAs that have some guidelines on solar, or they have complete blankets that say, no, you're not allowed to have solar at all. And in this case, the HOA had rules on solar, but when we presented this project to them, they wanted to amend their solar rules, or they were, at least I'll say they were open to amending their solar guidelines to allow for, to change from, hey, maybe 20 years ago, this is what solar looked like, but it's 2020. They look a heck of a lot different than they used to. So maybe we can be a little bit more, progressive in our guidelines. So what we did is we worked with the homeowners association. And again, I kind of wanted to show you like what solar really looks like nowadays and what it used to look like in the past. And so one of the things that we did, and you can see in this design here, is we use black on block panels. So there's panels that have like gray frames that like stick out a little bit more. Most people prefer the black on black, look a little bit sleeker on the roof. In many cases, you have the option to run conduit through like the attic. So there's not conduit all over the roof, and I'll kind of show you what that looks like as well. And then also keeping the layout consistent. So all these panels are portrait. You don't see like a bunch of landscape panels kind of jammed in there. Right now, I know that a lot of people on this call are probably familiar with it, but Senate Bill 289 is I guess a work in progress for I guess making the HOA guidelines more open to solar energy. Again, I think we did the math last week because our owner testified for Senate Bill 289, and we have lost over the past, I think, 12 months, like 143 customers were denied access to solar by their homeowners association. So that's a lot of homeowners who aren't able to save money on their electric bill. They're not able to increase their home value by going solar, and they're definitely not able to reduce their carbon footprint. So, and that's again, it's a triple win. So everybody wins. It's the goal is that you have, aesthetic looking solar, and people on both sides of the aisle, if you will, are all for it. So again, this is kind of what you want solar to look like, and what we present to review boards and HOAs of here's what we're shooting for. This is the type of install that we would do. Here's what we wouldn't do. So I just wanted to kind of like show an example of like what not to do. And again, this is the perception that some people might have on solar, because maybe there was a solar install 20 years ago that they was in their neighborhood that looked something along the lines of this. And you can see these panels are likely polycrystalline panels. They have like a bluer tint, so they kind of look bluer. They've got gray frames, so it kind of just sticks out a little bit more. You've got your vertical panels, and you've got your landscape and portrait panels right next to each other. A lot of jurisdictions don't prefer that. And then also you can see there's conduit running all the way up, kind of almost looking like Christmas lights or something. So that's not always, if you're looking at something like this and you took a poll of 100 people, the audience would certainly say they would prefer this to be what the solar looks like as opposed to this. So Again, I just wanted to kind of show some best practices of what we've been able to, had successes. It certainly hasn't worked for all jurisdictions and HOAs that we've worked with, but it's certainly worked a good amount of times. And the main 3 points is working with the decision makers and working with the community, making sure that they're educated and they know why there's so many homeowners and so many business owners wanting to transition to solar energy. And then obviously showing, the win that the homeowner wins, the community wins, and the earth wins, obviously. So that along with making sure that they know what it looks like. But that was all that I had for today. I kind of kept it short and sweet, but if you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to think of an answer for you.
Hi, I'm back. I think there were a couple folks who wanted to know if your presentation in particular was being recorded and if the entire event was. And the answer is yes, it will be available on Facebook afterward. And we'll be able to upload it to a YouTube channel, and so other people can access it, because especially when we're not all sitting in the same room, it's sometimes hard to, the cat comes in or the phone rings and we're trying to listen and we're trying to even take notes, but it's not always easy. So we want to make this as available to everyone as possible. And I thank you, Jake. That was, the picture of the one with the conduit running, I mean, you can see exactly why, yes, that's really amazing.
Yeah, there's a big difference. So, and a lot of times people don't know that there's options. You have an option to install something like this or an option to install something like this. So it's important that all parties are educated and they know what.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. We appreciate your being here today, and everybody seemed to be, you made a lot of really important points. So
awesome.
Thanks
again for having me. If you guys have any questions, you can go to our website, solarisfreedom.com, or reach out directly to me.
Will do. All right. So our next speaker, and there he is. I had, the little boxes move around and I get confused. I think it's meant to confuse me. So much conversation has been had around a just transition, and the fact that communities of color, disadvantaged communities, poorer communities are often not in a position to take advantage of the benefits of solar energy or renewable energy, and yet they're the ones that may need them the most. And so we wanted to have a conversation today with Jonathan Welly, who is the Executive Director of Cleveland Owns. And Cleveland Owns is focused on that very thing, on a just transition to a clean energy economy. They work in the greater Cleveland area, looking for new ways for people to tap into these benefits that others have more access to. So Jonathan, please tell us more about your efforts.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jane. Did you like that entrance? I made it on about 2 minutes before I was supposed to go. I'm sorry I'm joining so late, but
you're here when it counts.
Really pleased to be here. Yeah, thanks for having me, and glad to be with everyone. So yeah, like Jane said, I'm Jonathan Welly. I'm the Executive Director of Cleveland Owns. We are a nonprofit, and we work on building cooperative businesses mostly. And we do that because we think that the only way we're going to build an equitable city is when we have an equitable distribution of ownership. For better or worse, in a capitalist economy, ownership confers wealth, confers power. And right now, the concentrated ownership of our economy broadly is, we believe, at the heart of the systemic racism, of the segregation, and of the poverty that our city faces. That is no clearer than in the energy sector. If concentrated ownership is a problem anywhere, it is most certainly a problem in the energy sector, where incumbent monopoly ownership of electric lines has led to all sorts of problems. And it can be said very clearly, First Energy in particular is the greatest threat to a just transition to a clean energy economy in the state of Ohio. I believe I said that last year when I was at a growing local solar event. And if anyone didn't believe me then, I think the recent HB6 scandal will give you plenty of reason to believe that today. And I don't know if there's anyone from First Energy on the call. If you are, hello. I'd be happy to talk about this more later. You can meet me in the parking lot after today's session. Let's talk about Cleveland Owns. So Cleveland Owns, we build cooperative businesses. And we also have a new program we're calling an energy democracy program. And our theory behind this is a couple of thoughts. One is that what it's really going to take to make this just transition, and what that means clearly is to put principles and practices in place that ensure that the extractive way that we've structured our energy system does not continue as we make a transition to a clean energy economy, which is essential for continued life on this planet. And so we're trying to do that in a few ways, and I want to describe some of those ways. So let me share my screen, and I'll get specific on how we're doing this work. Okay, you should be able to see my screen, and I'm going to present, and you should be able to see that. Let me know if that becomes an issue. So like I said, I'm Jonathan Welly, you can see my name there. So our energy democracy program has 3 fronts. I want to walk through each of those and then focus on community solar, which is one of the fronts that Jane mentioned. The first is collective ownership. And one example of collective ownership is the Cleveland Solar Cooperative, a new group we got started officially just this year. We're a grassroots group of folks who've come together, and we're going to collectively own solar arrays. We're working on our first project right now on the west side of the city. And the idea is that at the local level, neighbors can come together, use the cooperative ownership structure that we've set up, and use that as a platform to basically pool money from their neighbors, own solar panels on the roof of a host, and that host will see benefits to their electric bill through net metering. Some of those benefits they're going to pass back to the solar co-op through a long-term power purchase agreement, and the solar co-op will decide what to do with those revenues. Likely, they may decide to pay back some of the investor owners who've joined the co-op in the first place. So we think that this is the first time it's been done in Ohio. It's been done to great effect in other states, California, Massachusetts, Minnesota, and we think that we're kind of bringing this for the first time to this state. You can learn more at clevelandsolar.org. The second thing we're doing is the one we're going to focus on today, which is bringing equitable community solar to Ohio, starting in Cleveland. And here you can see a picture of me. I'm standing with folks from the BC, which is a group of neighbors, mostly Black homeowners in Huff, who have shown incredible leadership on this work. And for about 2 years have been bringing forward this idea of a solar array in the city where there are multiple off-takers. So we'll talk about the mechanics of that. They've shown incredible poise and determination, bringing together stakeholders, developers, public entities. And the long-term play here in Cleveland is to get Cleveland Public Power to agree to the types of policies that we're going to need to see this project into fruition. And I'm really grateful for their leadership on that. Cleveland Owns is supporting them as kind of a consultant. Let's talk about what equitable community solar is, because it's a new phrase for a lot of folks. And I want to make sure that we have time to talk about it. So here's an analogy. You can read the slide as I'm describing. I have actually an analogy that's separate from this slide that might help explain what community solar is. Community solar is as if 50 households on a block all had solar panels on the roof, except one day they all decided at the same time to go up to their roof, take those panels down, walk those panels to a vacant lot at the end of the street, and put those panels down right side by side. So there is a solar array, it's at the end of the street, and everybody continues to receive the credits they would have received on their bill if those panels were on their roof. That's in general what community solar is. It involves kind of a fancy accounting technique, and it also means that the utility has to kind of allow that to happen. They have to approve that accounting technique It's called virtual net metering. And that's the only thing in Ohio standing between us and community solar. Other states have put this into great effect. Minnesota has more than 12,500 households who today are members of community solar projects. Massachusetts, Colorado, all over the country, California is starting. And so community solar is the future, and doing community solar in a way that is equitable is just as important. And here we define community solar, equitable community solar, in two specific regards. One, we want to make sure that the benefits of solar are going mostly to low and moderate income households. And second, we want to make sure that community ownership of those arrays is central to how we do community solar. So together with the BC in Cleveland, we're figuring out how to write those policies, how to put that program into practice. The real goal is to bring that statewide. I mentioned Minnesota, other great examples across the country of states that have found a way to do this and found a way to do this really effectively. One of the advantages of community solar is you don't need a roof that's ready for solar arrays, right? So if your roof is old or it's shaded, or you just don't have the money, you can't access the credit to install that array, community solar is a way to minimize those costs. You get some economies of scale by doing it in a larger array rather than many small rooftop arrays. And also, there's a version of community solar where you don't need to pay any money down. You simply subscribe and you see a small benefit on your electric bill. Now, so there are real advantages, and there's a real racial equity component to this too. 3 out of 4 households that are white in Northeast Ohio own a home. And among Black households, it's about 1 in 3, which is to say the opportunity for solar for Black families, if we rely solely on the rooftop strategy, is much more limited than it is for white families. So there's a real racial justice component to this work as well. Okay, let me tell you about the third way we're doing this, and then I'll get to some questions in the chat. We're also advocating for better utility policies. And that, again, has never been clearer than the scandal around HB6, a $61 million bribery case that First Energy was essentially paying off regulators, paying off lawmakers. And the PUCO chair, Sam Randazzo, just resigned in disgrace, which on the one hand is sad, on the other hand is really good news, because we have a new window of opportunity to implement policies that are going to keep people safe and connected to utilities during this crisis, which has been a real dereliction of duty from the PUCO so far. And second, we have a chance to think long-term. What are some of the long-term energy policies and strategies that we need to really reverse this really bad turn with HB6 and the really retrograde energy policies that the state and the PUCO have been implementing over the past several years. A really clear example of the work we're doing around this, we've partnered with some groups I'm very proud to mention: Sunrise Cleveland, the Sierra Club, Ohio Citizens Action, several other statewide groups, to put on an event just on Thursday. So the timing is great. We'd love to see you. We're going to be 4 o'clock. Solar United Neighbors is a partner in this as well. 4 o'clock, we're going to basically talk about how did we get here? What's the problem? And mostly we're going to spend most of our time talking about what are the characteristics and values that we want the next commissioner of the PUCO to have. And so we need everyone's input to build that profile of the person we want to fill that role. And our goal is to influence the way that Governor DeWine is making a decision about who's going to fill that role. So I'll just close with some action items, and then we'll have time for questions. How can you help grow local solar? Okay, so there are three strategies here. One is invite Cleveland Solar Cooperative to launch in your neighborhood. It's a decentralized model. Anybody can start a project group and bring together some neighbors to get that going. And we think that idea of local ownership is essential. 2, join us in some of these statewide and local efforts to enable equitable community solar. And if you're in a city that is not Cleveland and not Oberlin, or very few groups that have municipal electric utilities, so if you're in any other city than those, a very concrete and I admit challenging strategy, but one that is viable and powerful, is to municipalize your electric grid. Okay, again, very big project here, but nothing would scare First Energy more than a credible threat that, say, Lakewood and Cleveland Heights we're going to jointly form a municipal electric utility together, buy First Energy's assets and kick them out and tell them to never come back. That is the dream. And I'm going to keep talking about it until we get there. We also have the chance to join the Utility Corruption Town Hall, which is kind of a statewide advocacy campaign. And then here's one, a wrinkle I haven't spoken about yet, but NOPEC is a very powerful nonprofit in our region that has done really tremendous things at building the country's largest community choice aggregation program. And they are a huge asset. And they have not done everything they could to specifically commit to buying energy from local solar arrays. And we think they should. And so one of the things that we're exploring is figuring out how to influence NOPEC. And so if you're an elected official, I encourage you to explore that. And I know other groups are having those conversations. So reach out if you'd like to learn more about that work. I'll close with just one kind of parting thought, which is part of why solar in Ohio has been so slow to take off, in my opinion, is because there is not yet an organized base of grassroots advocates, regular people who do not get paid to do this, who are not elected officials, who are actually paying attention to this stuff in an organized way and acting to pressure the people who do have the power to make these changes. And at Cleveland Owns with our Energy Democracy Project, our goal is to change that. And we want to build alliances with other groups like the ones we're hosting the town hall with Solar United Neighbors, Sunrise Ohio, with the Sierra Club and others, to think about how do we actually bring the people power and attention that we need to adequately address these really substantial policy obstacles in the Ohio State House and at the PUCO and at the governor's office, so that we can build a sustainable base of political power that's going to take to make sure that we get Ohio off dirty fuels and onto clean energy, and ultimately make this transition that is necessary, and that we make that transition in a way that is just. Let me stop for some questions. I think there might be one in the chat. Let me check this. State bills pending. There's rumors of state bills pending. A question around, are there any state bills pending to allow community solar, I'm guessing is the question. Yeah, I've heard of things. Other people, I know Randy and others know much more about this. I haven't heard of anything concrete, but there are something in the works.
Yeah, Jonathan's right. There has been lots of discussion, especially around, there was House Bill 247 that was pending this GA, and there was a lot of discussion around the possibility of getting solar into that, community solar into that, because it was kind of a grid modernization effort of broad scale, but nothing concrete. And it's an important topic and people are interested in it. It's just about making sure we get it right if we're going to go forward with it and enable it at the statewide level. So.
Thanks, Randy.
Yeah, I think that was our last question, Jonathan. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, yeah, Randy is the in-house expert on these policies, so I appreciate that. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else has any questions. Otherwise, happy to turn it back to you, Jane.
Well, thank you. And Randy. And Tristan is here somewhere. Okay, there's a question here that just came in. When you say clean energy, are you including nuclear? And this person indicates that they don't. And I don't know, Randy, do you have of course, the state has a definition or had a definition that distinguished between alternative and renewable. And the nuclear was in the alternative category, I guess, not in the renewable. But Randy, how do you approach this?
I mean, it's different for every environmental advocate. I will tell you, there are some folks that are very strong supporters of nuclear because it is zero emissions. There are folks that are very, very opposed for lots and lots of different reasons. We're not opposed to it necessarily at OEC, but there are cheaper and cleaner forms available to us in the form of solar and wind that we support. And so, while we can say that, yes, nuclear is zero emissions, it is not without its problems, and it is not waste-free, obviously. We still have lots of issues with nuclear waste. So that's kind of where we are on it. And like I said, I mean, when we're talking about, a lot of what we've talked about here today, and especially what Jonathan was talking about, is decentralizing our energy economy. And when we are looking at large scale, installations like a huge nuclear facility like the two we have in Ohio or coal, those are just not cost effective anymore. and we can find power in cheaper ways that is more economic and better for democratic principles of energy democracy, like Jonathan was talking about. So.
Right. I think that, that debate continues. Other states have done what First Energy wanted to do in terms of the bailout, but their plants, it was a very different situation. In First Energy's plants are not worthy of a bailout in terms, I guess I'll just say that, aging nuclear power plants already on their license renewal. So we at Green Energy Ohio, obviously we focus on geothermal. I mean, geothermal is a great resource in Ohio. Solar, wind, energy efficiency. We have a very strong energy efficiency component because the kilowatt you don't use is the cheapest and the safest and the cleanest. So the more we can do with conservation and efficiency, the less we will have to rely on fossil fuels. And so there are a lot of ways to approach this. And as Randy said, I think every organization and every community or every advocate probably has a different position, but we all know where we want to end up, where we have to end up if we want to address climate change. Tristan, did you want to add anything to that?
Regarding the nuclear question? Not really. I mean,
just in general.
Yeah, Solar United Neighbors position is solar should lead the way, and distributed solar specifically. So we really believe in this model that Jonathan had presented just a minute ago, that if you can generate electricity locally, it has to go across less grid, uses less infrastructure, and also it's able to offset potentially dirty energy produced in this very same neighborhoods, providing cleaner energy for usually those most in need. So community solar is something we're extremely excited about talking about next year as things move forward in the General Assembly. So
right. And so often the large baseload power plants are located in areas where people cannot have no influence over what's happening around them. And that is certainly an issue. And it's another reason why distributed generation is really so important for underserved areas. And there's Sarah. Would you like to add to this?
Was that to me, Jane? Sorry.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. Hi. I don't know what we're talking about. I had to hop off and do a whole other thing. It's just that kind of day. I'm sorry.
No, it's great. We were talking about, there was a question about nuclear and whether we consider nuclear to be clean energy. And then we were also with Jonathan talking about underserved areas, and Appalachia is certainly one of them, and one that has been reliant on fossil fuel, both in terms of an extractive economy and also in terms of electricity generation, which is why it's so important to get to a more distributed model.
Absolutely. And, I think a lot of attention for good reason has been paid off on the environmental justice or injustices of people in rural places and people in areas that have been at an economic disadvantage and a social disadvantage for some time, and historically adversely impacted by extractive industries. And so certainly that's the story in this region. Thus, we need to really put twice as much energy into or effort into promoting a more cleaner and safer generation source here. And I doubt many would dispute that, but nuclear is a tough one. I mean, it employs many people. It is a emission-free generation process. At the same time, what we're doing to generations ahead of us in terms of polluting with radioactive material is just, it's unconscionable on so many levels. And so I really struggle with that when I have, my views span the gamut. I feel on one hand, like economically speaking, they're incredibly important jobs. At the same time, they continue to really perpetuate some extremely dangerous environmental impacts. So yeah, I don't know. I never know how to come down on that one. It's like the kind of question where I go, can we talk back to like the best solution for power generation?
Well, I think
go back there, right?
Let's talk about what's good for Ohio and for the planet and for, people across the continuum. And we know what that is. That is renewable energy. And
it is. And I think the other thing that's, I think, really, really important beyond just that renewable energy is safe, environmentally speaking, to own your own generation, whether that's an individual or a community, that's an incredibly powerful sovereignty, which changes the landscape fundamentally of utility ownership or investor ownership. And that to me is something that, when we think about the power dynamics at play in our political environment here in Ohio, to own and operate our own renewable power systems, whether on a home or in a business or in a field, those are all, that's the game changer right there, and an important piece of the puzzle. So
absolutely,
it's really important to me.
Thank you. Randy, did you have any, we did really well on time today.
We're ahead of schedule, which is unusual.
But that's okay. All of our presenters had great presentations, and there were some questions, and hopefully we got those answered. And if not, we'll be able to answer them going forward. But did you have any closing thoughts?
Yeah, just a wrap up. I hope everybody enjoyed the presentations today and that you're able to join us again tomorrow. We've got another slate of great folks that will be talking to us about some different topics tomorrow. So we'll have Chris Meyer, who's a longtime energy advocate and in the industry. So he'll be talking about energy special improvement districts and property assessed clean energy that helps encourage financing for commercial solar and small business projects. Tristan, as he said, will be talking about increasing solar in communities using residential co-ops and countywide co-ops, which will be really great. We've got Madeline Fleischer, who is with Dickinson Wright, and she will be talking about distribution utility standards and the interconnection process. So kind of getting into the nitty gritty piece of how this actually works if you move forward with it. And then the most exciting thing I always think, and we're doing our best to recreate this because I think, as we mentioned, this is our fourth or fifth growing local solar, and the big culmination of the day-long event usually is getting to go out and actually see one of the solar installations. And so we can't be together in person, but Tristan is going to lead a live on location story of the Lakewood solar site, along with some folks from Enerlogics, Malink, and Third Sun Solar. So we're really looking forward to do that tomorrow, and hope you're able to join us. And if you do have questions, feel free to ping Jane or I or Tristan tonight, and maybe we can hop on and answer those at the beginning tomorrow. But you certainly will have access to all the presentations, like Jane said, and the recordings and all of our contact information, so that we can be helpful for you as you move forward in your solar journeys, hopefully.
Someone said that they had submitted some questions in advance. Excuse me, I don't know where those would have gone. I admit that, but we will find them, I promise.
Yeah, and that was to Lorraine. Lorraine, if you, we will check in with Lisa, who's our technology guru from Solar United Neighbors. And if we can't find them, you are welcome to email Jane and I, and we will do our best to get to those either tomorrow on there, or we will answer you correctly. So
absolutely, we don't want to miss anybody's questions. So thank you. And I think it's about time now for everybody to go back to work. But we will see you at lunchtime tomorrow. So thank you again. And please join us at noon, same place.
Thanks, everyone. See you tomorrow.
Thank you.
everybody.
Carol.